Indian people are fully aware of what their accent sounds like. We don't actually need you. We know exactly what it sounds like. We know it's not the coolest accent in the world, you know? You're never gonna see two Indian guys in a club standing around going, "Hey man, aren't we cool? Don't we sound really hip? We are going to meet all the bitches tonight."
Hey everyone, Tony here. Welcome to another episode of The Cusp. That clip you just heard was Russell Peters in his breakout performance in 2004. When that special first went viral, the three of us were still kids, and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to be when we grew up. In this episode, we're going to start off by talking about those childhood aspirations. But then we're also going to talk about diversity in media and how being represented on screen can really impact what you think is possible growing up. We also talked about contemporary media figures like Russell Peters and how media representation can affect the expectations that people have when they first meet you. Just a quick note, we're not trying to be the moral arbiters of our communities here, and we understand that there are people that might disagree with our perspectives on these issues. If you're one of those people, feel free to reach out to us at thecusppod@gmail.com and express your perspective there. Thanks again for tuning in, and here's Tom on what he wanted to be when he grew up.
So I know I changed my mind a lot from like grade 1 to grade 6. I wanted to be many things. And for context, my dad was a banker, my mom was a gynecologist, and those were none of my choices from grade 1 to grade 6. I remember, I think the first choice or the first thing I really wanted to be passionately was a CIA detective. Like not CIA rather, CSI. Think CSI Miami.
James Bond, like
yeah, like a mix of not James Bond, like CSI Miami. That was really the motivation. I was watching too much CSI Miami when I was like 7 years old, and there was this time we did a math competition in school, and I won. So yeah, I was a bit of a nerd. Anyway, I won this math competition, and the prize was a book about how forensic science works and how they like take fingerprints and do iris scans and all those things. And I was just fascinated by it. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to be the next like CSI Miami.
Sorry, why did they have a forensic science book as the prize for this math competition? Like they didn't have like a math book or like something related.
I have no idea, but that was just it. And it was just a fascinating book. And I think it had all these tiny like attachments to it. So I think there was like a tape or something you could put your fingers on and you can see your fingerprints, and then you could compare your fingerprints to like other fingerprints in the books because there's a general type. Yeah, so like as a 7, 8 year old, I was like, this is just magnificent. It's just fascinating. I couldn't stop. So anyway, that was one thing I wanted to be, the next CSI dude. What about you guys?
Cool. Interesting, Tom. When did the whole CSI agent thing fade out for you?
I think it faded out when I found the next thing I wanted to be. But I'll tell you what the next thing was. But you guys go first.
Okay. I guess for me, the first thing I ever wanted to be was, that I can remember at least, was an astronaut. And this was at the age of, I think, 6 or 7 years old. And I was hooked. Like I was reading every single astronaut paper, like astronomy paper that you could read in like the library. I was checking out books. I was like on the internet surfing about stuff. I was learning about planets. I was like super nerdy into it, and I think I did a project on Roberta Bondar, who's like a famous female Canadian astronaut, and I was just like really like enamored with the prospect of becoming one. And then I don't remember what the name of the crash was, but there was a huge spaceship crash, and I remembered like I was shook as a kid, and I wouldn't go to school. I wouldn't eat any food. My parents were like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And I wouldn't say anything. It was like I think 5 or 6 days, and then finally my mom was like, "Okay, what's up, man? Like you're not saying anything. What's going on?" And then I started crying, and I was like, "I don't want to be an astronaut." And then my mom told me, you don't have to be an astronaut, dude. You can be whatever you want. And then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I kind of just moved on. I don't remember what the next thing was, but I remember that was like a huge thing as a kid. So yeah, that was the first thing I
I
wanted to do.
just sorry, just imagine your mom saying something more savage than that. Like, don't worry, Uncle, you're not going to be an astronaut anyway.
That's pretty sad.
Yeah, but that was the first thing for me, and then after that, it was a bunch of different things. It was like I watched The Inconvenient Truth. I wanted to be an environmentalist. I wanted to be a politician at one point. I still have some aspirations there. I wanted to be an investment bank, not investment, sorry, a lawyer at one point because of Suits. But yeah,
It
mine's
seems
changed
like
a
you're
lot.
getting like a lot of your aspirations from like external sources. So like you'll watch
And
a
I think that's
movie or
fair.
TV
I
show
think
and
that's
you'll be
fair,
like,
Tony, because that happened with me too. I was watching CSI Miami, and I wanted to be the next what's his name, Horatio, I think is his name. I
mm.
wanted to do that glasses flip so bad.
Mm. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I went through like the astronaut phase like any self-respecting nerdy kid. But the two standouts for me are probably there was like a time I wanted to be a history teacher and another time where I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. Um I guess I wanted to be
Why
a
don't you
history.
tell? You should tell us more about that one, Tony, the stand-up comedian one.
Yeah, I mean I gave it a shot and it wasn't like I was good. I'll tell you what, like
Wow.
You were trapped, what you're saying?
no, I don't think I was trash. I think there are certain constraints on like becoming uh successful in stand-up comedy that require uh to pass through those constraints you have to make some sacrifices. Like that I don't think as like a Indo-Canadian person I was going to make for a multitude of reasons. And I think this is maybe why there aren't that many like Indo-Canadians represented in media at times. It's just
Mm.
like a completely unsafe career play. You're more or less committing your entire life to trying to become a stand-up comedian, something that doesn't have a guarantee that it'll pay off. There are like cultural hurdles. Like obviously it's going to be harder to make it as a stand-up if you're like a brown guy. Um, but also just geographically, like I'd probably have to move somewhere with like a more robust stand-up scene. Like in Canada, there's Montreal, there's Toronto. Uh, in America, there's more places, but
Mm. Okay.
it takes a lot of commitment. So I just decided to go to university, and now I'm going to be a lawyer,
Well, I
cracking
mean,
jokes in court.
funny.
um, the other thing I wanted to be when growing up, which was kind of weird, but again, heavily influenced by what I was just watching at the time. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent on like a big news channel. Like that, I was very passionate about that. And of course, the major reason is in African households in general, CNN is like a big deal. Like almost, I don't know the percentage, but I'm gonna guess at least 80% of our households watch CNN every night
Oh
in
wow.
Africa, and I don't know why. Not just Nigeria, but I think a lot of places in Africa they do that. So anyway, I was always watching CNN growing up, and I was watching people like Christian Amanpour. I was watching Anderson Cooper. I was watching Richard Crest, and I was like, man, these people have cool jobs. They talk to fun people and they travel around the world. I want to do that. So I wanted to be a foreign worldwide correspondent. But then apart from
Yeah.
that, I think then life got a bit more serious. I think I after I think it was grade 11 or 10, I read the book Freakonomics, and then I decided I want to be an economist. Like that is the goal. That is all I wanted to do. I wanted to study everything about behavioral economics, about nudge theory, all of that. Like that just became the thing. And still that didn't happen. Ended up becoming a consultant instead. But it's just funny how many things I wanted to be, and then what I ended up being was just kind of completely different. And what I might do in the future might be extremely different as well.
So I think we all can relate to that a little bit. When we're younger, we dream of being many things that might be impossible to us, but things that might not even make sense, but we don't really care. We're just kids and we're just dreaming. But the boys and I really started to wonder what happens when we grow up, what influences us, and what makes us actually make that final decision of what we want to start pursuing as a career. And we explore that in the next part of the podcast.
It's interesting to me that I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, even though when I was watching all these news channels and watching all these foreign correspondents, none of them really look like me. But I found it. I've always thought back to why did I still think that was a career I could pursue, or maybe actually that's why I didn't keep that dream alive, because I just didn't see a lot of people that look like me doing that. But
it's interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like I feel exactly the same way about stand-up comedy, in the sense that there were really no, outside of Russell Peters, who really swerved into like he swerved into using the Indian accent and kind of like using all these different accents and catering to like the tropes about Indian people to a certain extent. Outside of him, there weren't really any Indo-Canadian or Indian role models in the stand-up comedy scene in North America. Later on, Aziz, when I like after I wasn't considering it anymore, Aziz Ansari started blowing up, and now Hassan Minhaj is big. So there are a lot of people that I guess from the community that are making it now. But at the time, like there wasn't really anyone the Indo-Canadian community could point to and say like that's the role model of media success, except Russell Peters, who I actually think like achieved like a Elvis Presley status for like the Indian community in North America. I don't know if you, or South Asian community overall, I would say. I don't know if you agree, Ankur.
Yeah, he was kind of like so. First of all, 100%. I definitely like can see what you're saying, and I mean, to add on to what Tony said, the other thing that we've seen, aside from I guess more mainstream comedians like Hassan Minhaj and Aziz, is also kind of YouTube comedians blowing up. So I'm thinking like in Canada, Just Rain is blown up, and I'm thinking people like Lily Singh, who has her own show. And so we didn't. I mean, like when I was growing up, I saw some of their videos on YouTube, but none of them were really big until I was in my 20s. Right, that's when I saw more representation, and now we're seeing the Mindy Kalings of the world and different actors. The one guy from Aladdin who's Egyptian Canadian. So we are seeing more of that. But yeah, like Tony said, all we really had as a kid was Russell.
So it's interesting because what I'm hearing is like when we were all growing up, we wanted to be different things, and obviously as kids, you dream about doing a lot of things that you probably can't do it, like being an astronaut and all those kind of things. But it seems like we have a wide variety of ideas, and they kind of get reined in the more as you grow up, which is what we expect. But it seems that the ideas we rein into or narrow down into, they become a function of what we think is actually possible for us to achieve as people of color or as people of a certain community. So we might start with a big bucket of wild ideas, but they all get narrowed down into what we've seen other people actually do that look like us.
I would say one thing though, Tom. I think just say like For our generation, I think it has broadened a bit in comparison to my parents. And I'll give the example of like whenever I talk about careers with my dad. When I was growing up, when I was like, I mean, in high school, junior high, etc., my dad would always say like focus on quantitative stuff because that's what people like us do. We can't thrive in just talking and selling and stuff like that. That's because that's what the Westerners do.
He straight up said that Nepalese people can't do things outside of quantitative stuff.
Well, it's not even like he
Yeah.
wasn't even trying to be. It was just like, look, all he's seen is people from our backgrounds thriving in STEM backgrounds, and so he would push me towards that. And it's only later on when I proved to him that I was actually really talented at more qualitative skills that he was like, okay, you know what, you can do whatever you need to do because I have faith.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I kind of experienced something similar. Like my parents really wanted to push my brother and I into quantitative fields. I think part of that is informed by the fact that they had STEM careers. Um and like really one of the only ways to immigrate to Canada at the time like was to establish have like an established career here already. And STEM was like one of the main ways to make sure that happened. Uh, and so like when they're here, it's like yeah, they don't they don't want their kid going into something unstable or risky. And I think that's probably true for a lot of immigrant communities. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say, Tony, that's a major driver for my parents too, especially when they sent me to Canada to study. It's all about doing something that they know would at least guarantee me a job or a decent paying job. So the classic trope of immigrants only letting their children be doctors, lawyers, or engineers, it's all from that basis, right? They think it's a guarantee of a certain level of income, a certain livelihood that they want to make sure you achieve.
I was gonna say though, I think something interesting on that Lily Singh and Just Rain point, that I'm noticing now is Gen Zs who've grown up in, and I'm talking about people under 18 here, that have grown up in a world where they take at least South Asian media representation not for granted, but they have a lot more of it. I think view some of the figures we had growing up with a completely different lens. In the sense that I see now that people like Lily Singh have been criticized for using like the fake Indian accent in some of their skits or comedic material, in the same way Russell Peters did. And when we were growing up, because that was our only option, it was great, it was hilarious, whatever he could do to get that attention and to get people to listen, that was great. And it was the first time we were seeing an Indian comedian. Whereas now people are saying, well, Lily Singh doesn't need to do that. She has a platform, she has an audience. All she's doing is reinforcing these negative stereotypes with a fake accent. An accent that a lot of our parents have, by the way. I'd love to hear either of your thoughts on that. I kind of think that they should probably stop using the accents. I'm basing that on some thoughts I've had about Indian representation in the media for a long time. For instance, when the Apu debate started, whether he should be removed from The Simpsons or they should maintain the character, I personally one if I was ever bullied as a kid, one of the main ways I'd be bullied is frankly white kids using the Apu accent. And so for me it wasn't even a question that he shouldn't be on The Simpsons anymore. But I know for a lot of older Indian people, it was like, hey, this was like an Indian character in a time when there were no Indian characters anywhere on TV. Why do we want to remove this guy? And of course he's voiced by a white person, so that kind of weighs to
Yeah.
one side.
So Tony, I think for me, how I see it is, I think it's growth, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as you said, in our parents' generations, there was no representation in media. So just getting anyone or any kind of character, even if their accent was a stereotype, just getting something, it meant something to that generation, right? But as
Yeah,
society has grown, I think we've gotten to a stage where we don't need to do that. Maybe people like Lady Singh and Russell Peters, to first appeal to the mass audience, they needed to do these stereotype accents to appeal to a mass audience. But now that they've established a certain repertoire, a certain critical mass, I think it's time that society that they grow out of that phase where they don't feel the need to do those stereotypes to appeal to groups. I feel like once they've reached that critical mass, they can change that stereotype. But I don't think we should also blame them. I think when we look back in the past, we shouldn't blame them with our 2020 sunglasses on, right? We need to accept that they did that for a reason, and we need to allow them the space to grow and change, right? I think it's a fair criticism, but I think we should also accept that they did it for a reason.
yeah, I completely agree with all of that, Tom, and I'll echo it. I have no interest in canceling Lily Singh or Aziz or Mindy Kaling or Russell Peters or anyone that might have at a time relied on a South Asian stereotype to get ahead. These are role models or in positions to be role models now for the Indian or South Asian community overall. And I don't think we should be canceling them because of what they had to do to get into that position. At the same time,
Hmm.
I'm not going to absolve them of responsibility today to not propagate those stereotypes because they don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think balancing those two interests, like I still want to be able to celebrate Russell Peters' career and I hope he's still successful, but I don't think he needs to be using the accents as much anymore, even though it was at one point part of his act. And I think honestly, all of their art forms will grow as a result of kind of stepping away from those
Yeah.
stereotypes, but also really put the best foot forward for the community. Just to get back to this idea of the representation you have at the time versus the representation you want and kind of balancing those interests. I look at someone like Lily Singh. Again, I have no interest at all in canceling someone like her. She needs to stop doing the accents now, in my opinion. Yeah, I totally understand. Part of reconciling the Indo-Canadian experience in Canada with the media representation we have at times was to do those accents because you know what? Our parents were never going to be on television. So the only time we would hear someone that sounded like our parents was from someone our age doing an accent like that, like Lily Singh or Just Rain. And at this point, it's like I don't think we need to do that anymore. We as a community can just express what we've been experiencing because we have these platforms now. I will also say I think the perfect example of how what they were at the time has resulted in tangible benefits for our community is Just Rain, who did those skits. And arguably Jagmeet Singh, who is a political party leader in Canada now, was really elevated on Just Rain's YouTube channel and by the Indian community broadly once he got that exposure. So
Mm.
it's resulted in a minority face represented in Canadian political discourse. So and not to get too much into that or his politics, but I think that's certainly good to see from like a Indo-Canadian perspective.
Yeah.
So we spoke about people with a huge following and a huge influence in the media, people from minority backgrounds, and that's important. It's important to see people that look like you in media, people with shared experiences, and just having that diversity of perspectives in the media is super important. So we spoke a little bit about the media and the power of it, and what kind of experiences have we seen in the media, and how is that changing?
Tom,
Oh,
what do you
yeah, go ahead.
feel about the representation, not necessarily just in Canadian media, but just media in, I guess, the Western world overall about the African immigrant experience? Because I'm sure you get a lot of content about Black experience, but specifically the African immigrant experience?
I think it's followed similar paths as the Indo-Canadian experience. Whoever you get, whoever is the first real face on mainstream has to do the accents to kind of break into the crowd, because that's kind of what the to be frank, the fairly predominantly white crowd expects them to sound like. So that's the accent they're gonna have. So I see a show like Dear White People, and there's a character in that show that I really resonate with, because he's an African character, and he's come from Africa, but he's studying at an Ivy League school, and he clearly has an African tone to his accent, but it's not in a way that's overly expressed so that everyone knows he's an African character. It's just there. It's just like part of his experience. I think they really found a nice balance to that. So it's good to get that kind of representation now in media, and I think again there's growth in that area. So I think again, just really the main point is it's follows similar paths as the Indo-Canadian experience, and I think we're starting to get more representation that's a bit more it's less, like as you mentioned, Anka, the act is less about the accents, but now it's actually about the whole experience of that individual, which I start to appreciate.
Do you think part of this is because of changes in media, like mediums, in the sense that Dear White People, obviously an exceptional show, represents different aspects of Black and minority experiences, especially in the college setting, which is really unique. But I almost feel like, and I'm not sure how that show was created, but I'm willing to bet Netflix gave creative freedom to a group of independent creators to produce this content, which I don't think necessarily would have been possible when you just had a couple cable networks predominantly run by, crotchety, pale, male, and stale guys, that were kind of pre-selecting this content. And I'm not necessarily, I don't know the leadership of Netflix or whether it's more diverse, but I feel like you get a lot more nuance and reflections of these different experiences in media content, not just on Netflix, but everywhere today. So do you think part of that is because mediums are changing?
I mean, it has to be, right? I think part of it is mediums are changing, but I think probably the biggest driver is just demographics are changing. I think
Yeah.
I think media companies, I don't think they're benevolently good and they're doing it just out of the goodness of their hearts. I think there's obviously a profit motive there, and they've probably seen that the demographics are changing. Demographics in America, North America in general, are changing to a more diverse group of people. So we have to make shows that also appeal to this new middle class that has this disposable income and wants to see
Yeah.
themselves in the media. So I
There,
think definitely it's a bit of both.
yeah, one thing I'd say is I feel like there's growing demand for second generation content. So, for example, so for listeners who don't know, I come from a Nepalese family. I was born in Nepal but raised here in Canada. And Nepal borders on India, so we watched a lot of Bollywood growing up. Indian content was very popular in my household. But as much as I loved Bollywood and love Bollywood, I still like watch a ton of that content. It still was distinctly different from, I think, the Indo-Canadian or Indo-American experience. And so it was nice for me, I guess later on in my late teens, early 20s, to see people that spoke to that specific experience, like Hassan Minaj, like Aziz Ansari or Lily Singh, and also to see content that's coming out now to speak to that experience, like Mindy Kaling is having a show that's coming out now, etc. And I think we're starting to see more of that with regards to different ethnic groups and different demographics. Like, for example, Crazy Rich Asians kind of spoke more to Asian people who grew up here, or what's the word? Kim's Convenience is a really popular show right now that is about a Korean Canadian family in Toronto. Right. And so I feel like the growing demographics of ethnic minorities here in North America and also in societies like the UK and Australia, etc., means that there's a growing demand for content that reflects their lived experiences, which is probably different from the lived experiences of someone that grew up in India or in China or in Korea, etc.
And something I just wanted to note as well is I just really wanted to talk about the power of the media, and this is more of a personal experience. So just to tell you what just the power the media has. So I came to Canada when I was 17 years old, and I came and I did a 1 year in high school, and then I went to university here. So I was a fairly older person. I had fairly established what my character is and the kind of person I wanted to be. So I was 17 years old when I came to Canada, and from Nigeria, so I'm of African heritage. But as soon as I landed in high school, I could tell that people expected me to behave a certain way. There was a certain there were certain characteristics they expected me to have as a black person in North America, even though I came from an African heritage. And a lot of this was predominantly inspired by what they've seen of black characters in North American media. And what they had seen is mostly a very African American experience, which is different from the African experience. But that didn't matter to them because as long as I was in North America, I was black, so I had to act like every other black character they had seen in media. So, for example, I would go to the gym and we would start basketball classes, and people would be like, "I want Tom on my team because I think he's gonna be great." And I was like, "Dude, I've never played basketball ever. Like, this is not this is not my skill set." But they had expected me to do that because that's what the African American experience had shown them. Other things was like somebody would come up to me and be like, "Tom, have you listened to the latest Kanye West album?" I'm like, I like Kanye, but I'm not a big fan, so no, I can't rap every single line to his album for you. And there was just all these like little stereotypes that they expected me to have, and it didn't matter that I was a black person from Africa. As long as I was in North America, the media experience of an African American and the stereotypes of African Americans had all been put on me as well, and it's just what was expected. So the media just really shaped everyone's expectations of me. So when I see a character like the person in Dear White People who is a black person in America, but they were able to distinctly show his experience as someone from an African heritage, like that was really, that was just touching for me. It just felt nice for someone to explain that, yes, he's black, but he has his own lived experience. It's all about the intersectionality of individuals. You can't judge them based on one characteristic. It's an amalgamation of things, right?
Yeah, I guess yeah, that's a really good way to put that. I kind of had a not obviously we have different intersecting identities, so not necessarily an identical experience, but similar in some of those themes. Growing up and obviously this term is what it is. As like a quote whitewashed person, as I'm told I am. Um, in Canada, it's interesting. It's like there are these two cultures colliding, this Indian culture and then kind of the multiplicity of cultures you see in Canada colliding, and then kind of this community emerging out of that collision with its with both cultures reflected in it. And it's interesting. Like I get criticized for being too brown on one side and not brown enough on the other. And I get both, and it's irritating to me at times because I can't be accountable for any acculturation or assimilation that took place as a result of the community I grew up in. And I also can't be accountable for like the unique identity that I have. Those things are just facts. Like I just am who I am and am a reflection of the community I grew up in. That does not mean I can't own the fact that I'm a South Asian person and the impact that my skin color has on any interaction I have with anyone, whether they're white or another Indian person. That colors that interaction, and again makes them attribute a certain set of characteristics to me. And like Tom said, they expect certain things out of me, and it's like those rival expectations I found difficult to balance.
You're 100% right. Like when I was in Nigeria, I was just Tom. But when I came to Canada, I was now Tom, the black guy. Like that all of a sudden was kind of the major characteristic.
Over the past couple of weeks, we've been trying out new segments of our podcast to end the podcast with. And this week, we're trying out a new segment. We call it, What Are You Sleeping On? And the idea is the boys and I will each pitch each other a new book, movie, TV show, something we've picked up over the past week. And we're going to try and convince each other that it's great and they should pick it up as well. So we'll each have a minute to pitch the idea and a minute to ask questions about the idea. So hope you enjoy some of our suggestions for this week and hope to see you next time. Thanks.
So, 30 seconds on the clock. Anka, what are you sleeping on?
Ooh, interesting. Okay, so I think this fits really well with the theme of today's episode. The show I think we've all been sleeping on is called Family Karma. Now, it is a reality TV show about the lived experiences of South Asian Americans, specifically Indian Americans in Miami. The reason why I think it's dope is it represents the duality of our communities. It has like some auntie drama. It has some characters who aren't just trashy; they're actually pretty realistic. So, and it's just entertaining. So I think it's just an entertaining watch that you can, watch, laugh at, discuss with your friends, and I think it's a good time. So you're sleeping on Family Karma. That's my pitch.
What platforms is it on?
Platforms, it's available on I think TELUS On Demand, and if you don't have cable like most of us don't, you can also get I think a free trial of I don't remember what the name is right now. It's slipping my head. Slice in Canada. You can get a free trial of Slice for a month and just watch it there. Most of the episodes of the season are already out, so you can probably binge it and then just go from there.
Are you watching it with your parents?
I am. They're kind of like surprised at how much these people are wilding out. They're just like, oh my god, like, do you guys do this? And I'm like, sometimes we drink and sometimes we party. Like, wait, were you surprised? You know what I mean? So I think they're surprised by it. And they're finding it humorous, and they find specifically, I think they find the aunties and uncles kind of humorous because they're like, oh, we do that to you, or we don't do that to you. So it's interesting for them to see their experiences.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So next person. So Tony, what are you slipping on? You have 30 seconds on the clock.
Okay, so I have two things. First of all, if you haven't watched Tiger King yet, you're not cooler than the rest of us. You're not classy. You're just missing out on a great show, so you should watch Tiger King. The second one is I just finished watching Chernobyl. It's on HBO. Really great show. Much better than you might expect. And it really gives you insight into how bad this disaster could have been. And the preventative measures and how the bureaucratic state impacted those measures. So it's a really great experience, great actors. I definitely encourage people to watch it.
Yeah, I have to say about Chernobyl, it's especially during this post-pandemic world we're living in, it's a timely show talking about, like you said, how bureaucratic governments respond in a time of emergency and how that can really shape the eventual results of that emergency. It's a fascinating show.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say it's timely because I think it came out like a year ago or 2 years ago, so the pandemic wasn't even in the picture. But I guess the message still stands. Chernobyl, I've heard nothing but good things about actually, so I'm gonna get on that. I'm watching The Wire right now on HBO, so I think when I'm done that, I'll watch Chernobyl.
Yeah, Wire's really good. Yeah, and to the timeliness point, it's interesting. It's a disaster that was prevented, and we think a lot about these. I think we don't fully appreciate sometimes the disasters that could have been because of these preventative measures. So, for instance, Ebola could have been as bad as COVID-19, but we shut it down. And we're not going to hear about like a lot of the broad impacts that could have occurred just because we were ahead of the game. So a lot to think about as we consider these other, unknown knowns, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to pitch something completely wild. So I think you all know I'm a big anime fan. So picture this. It's a world where humans have been living on Mars for about 50 years. and there's two indie artists, two girls who are trying to bring back creativity and music to Mars, because now human beings all listen to music and things created by AI. So they're trying to bring back that creativity into Mars and change the way society interprets art. And just to top it all off as well, there's a little bit of right-wing politics where politicians in Mars want to send back refugees from Earth back to Earth, and all of this is happening as it crosses with the girls' music and their influence. It's a completely wild show, great anime, great music, great animation. It's such a beautiful show to watch, and I recommend it highly just because it's so different and so entertaining. I should say the name. I should say the name of the show. The name of the show is Carol and Tuesday on Netflix. Just a great show.
Carol on Tuesday?
Carol and Tuesday. Those are the names of the two indie artist girls. Yeah.
I'm in. I'm sold. I'm watching. I don't even have any questions.
Especially if you haven't watched anime before, it might be a good one to watch first. I think it's pretty open to people who don't even have past like anime watching experience.
Damn, man. Well, yo, I'm in. Like, I think you sold me on this. Tony, you got any questions?
No, I'm good. I feel like I can't fit more anime into my media digest right now.
What are you watching right
now? Right now I'm trying to get through Hunter x Hunter, which came out a couple years ago. Which
Hunter x Hunter is Hunter x Hunter is it's interesting, especially when you get to the Chimera arc. My gosh, it becomes something else. No spoilers, but it's something else.
Damn. Alright everyone, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us on your preferred podcast listening platform and follow us on social. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our handles are all at The Cusp Pod. That's no space, no caps, The Cusp Pod. You can also email us at thecusppod@gmail.com. And yeah, let us know what you thought about the episode. Let us know what you liked, what you disliked. And of course, if you're really vibing with this content, share it with your friends because we'd love to grow the podcast. All right, that's it. Thank you again. Bye-bye now.